property rights issue there, though, is one where there is a balance between the the needs and entitlements of the landowner and the needs and entitlements of the community where that land sits. In the commercial district, the property rights issue is finding one of balance. No one disagrees that is not, that everyone agrees that that's the appropriate place for us to develop and increase our tax base. We need to do that as effectively and appropriately as possible. And I think that there are some exciting ways to bring the right scale of development to that corridor. We haven't found that way yet, and I don't think what we are entertaining in terms of moving forward, in terms of rezoning on that land, really represents any significant infringement on property rights. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Again, I think all of us feel the same way. Obviously, no one is saying we should abolish the zoning. It was created years and years ago, decades ago, to protect the health and safety of the community in which it's enacted. And when I talk about safety and health, I'm talking about traffic and infrastructure, and that's why there's zoning. But property rights precedes even our zoning. That's a right that we've been given through our form of government, and I believe in it strongly. I don't believe it should, that there's unlimited property rights. I don't believe that you can set, a nuclear power explosion off in your property because it's yours. Of course, there has to be limits, but I think this all came about because we were discussing property rights in our commercial district, which again is only 2% of this town. It's been zoned commercial for decades, and to restrict it further, again, I can agree to some further restrictions, but the cap, again, I think is too small. We often discuss, and I've heard people throughout the community say, the people that own it bought it as an investment. Look what's happening to my investment in the stock market. I don't think you can make the analogy. No one infiltrates your stock portfolio and changes the rules of the stock on you. That's a question of market. That investment will change as the market changes. That doesn't mean that zoning laws can't change, because I understand they can, but I think first and foremost, the owner and the consideration has to be given to the owner and what the property was zoned when they bought it. The benefit, when people and the applicants appear before the zoning law, the benefit goes to the property owner unless you can prove otherwise that there's a negative impact. So we have to bear that in mind. I'm always concerned once we start restricting people with their property, where does it go next? I think we really need to prove a health and safety issue case by case before you start telling people what they can do with property that's been zoned a particular way for decades in our town.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Rivera.
2 points in answering some of the things Russ brought up. It's often said that this is changing the game in the middle of the game. It's not. The owners are well aware of that because a few years ago they approached Ed Clark, a supervisor, and asked him, look, your comprehensive plan says one thing, the zoning's wide open to us. That's not my opinion, that was the owner's opinion. They said, what does the town want there? Ed brought me in, thought I was an expert apparently, because I was on the planning board for 4 years, little did he know. So I looked to an expert, a friend of mine who hadn't been involved in the town, Chuck Voss, he's a town planner. We put together a hamlet plan for the owners. And they were very receptive of it. We call it a hamlet plan, and that's a bit of a misnomer too. It went out from the hamlet area that was designated by previous plans, and it morphed into more retail, more commercial, and so forth. The owners loved it and thanked us very much for that. They said they even had a developer that was interested in something like that. So that's a bit of a misnomer that we're changing the rules in the comprehensive plan. But property rights, I'm the biggest advocate of property rights, but property rights are not land rights solely. As a student of the founders, I've always had an interest in what they thought, and property was always restricted by the tyrants that, ran countries before us. And the founders wanted all property to be able to be acquired, no matter what it was. I acquire a car as property. I can't drive down the road at 100 miles an hour. Matter of fact, most places it's 50, good number. So, and I can't take my land and I can't put a toxic waste dump. I've even had a close neighbor complain about manure spreading that might get on their property. And you take those things into consideration. But this is a big consideration with a big box. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKay, this next question will be with you. What do you say to people who believe that bringing a major retailer to New Scotland would help offset the amount that they pay in school and property tax? And how do you balance responsible growth while still alleviating those taxes?
Well, to repeat what has been said by Doug and I several times already this evening, this is the 85-85A corridor is the appropriate place for our town to focus retail development efforts. The fact that it has been shrinking, interestingly enough, is attributable to a whole series of land use decisions in town that have taken place over time, particularly to allow residential development in the commercial zone. And clearly that needs to stop so we can save the commercial development resource that we have. But there are significant negative impacts when you build too big. And it's not just building too big at 750,000 square feet. It really is the magic number for a town of our size and of our tax base and of our service base really is right around 100,000 square feet. There obviously would be increased assessment on any developed property in the commercial zone. But if you develop too big, you start getting into public safety costs. You start getting into the need to have a police force, new public safety equipment, fire trucks, new training for your fire personnel. The New Salem Fire District, like many in town, is an all-volunteer effort. It shares ambulance service requirements with the village of Voorheesville. It is understaffed during daytime hours. These are some of the issues that come with building too big, and these are some of the costs that you've got to cover that will offset the tax revenue that a development over a certain size will bear upon us. So it is the right place to build. How we build there is the issue. A series of mixed uses and smaller scale development focus that is reinforces the existing local business owners and business base and attracts new local entrepreneurs. I think that's what fits aesthetically and financially in our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Ms. Robinson.
Again, I think we'll all agree that a huge monstrosity of a plaza isn't what anyone wants, but I do believe that a nice commercial plaza there of some size, 125, 150, whatever, a nice grocery store, some smaller shops, will help the tax base. It will particularly help the school taxes, and something of that size. I'm talking about something maybe between the size of the Swinglands Plaza and maybe half the size of Stuyvesant, which would be above the 100,000 square foot cap. Will produce jobs for our community, will produce close shopping for people who don't like to go outside the community, like some of our seniors. I know a lot of seniors in this town that would prefer to shop here locally, would provide an avenue for a grocery store. The average grocery store these days is about 65,000 square feet. The new ones are being built if Hannaford should ever want to move or grow. And I'm not saying that they're looking at that, but they are talking about renovations and the fact that they need to enlarge to carry a bigger variety. I have actually spoken to experts who serve the large retail areas, and they have said firemen, policemen, and there aren't that large number of calls that everyone is leading us to believe. Glenmont is an anomaly, and we can learn from the problems they've had there. But some of the bigger stores, and again, I'm not promoting them, I'm just saying to say that big retail necessarily produces crime and high taxes is not necessarily so. I'd be happy to introduce you to some of the firemen I've spoken to. Our fire trucks currently in our town have the ladders necessary for something more than a story or two. So I think the fear-mongering isn't accurate. And again, that may be the case if it was a 750,000 square foot mall. Nobody wants that. Bethlehem's 2020 report says specifically, and at the town of Bethlehem, they did a long research study, that their taxes are going up because of residential development, and they encourage the town to seek out more commercial development. And they have 20% of their property that is non-residential. We have about 6%. So if you look at the 2020 report in the town of Bethlehem, I think it's an eye-opener about what commercial can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Mr.
So many things. Residential is a problem in Bethlehem.